Good day, and thank you for joining us for this Navient Solutions Spotlight on reporting dashboards. I am your presenter, and my name is Guy Schrader. I am the Manager of Sales Engineering with Navient. And a little bit of housekeeping as we get into this webinar. You will be muted on the GoToWebinar, so if you do wish to communicate with us, please use the chat box. And at the end of this webinar will be a survey. Please provide your feedback on any future topics that you wish to have so that we can better serve you. So without any further delay, today we're talking about OnBase and the Reporting Dashboards module. So high-level overview of the agenda. We're going to talk about what the problem is potentially with your current reporting, what the Reporting Dashboards module is. We'll go through a demonstration. We'll recap with some of the components of what the Reporting Dashboards does. Why do you need it? So that's going to be a summary of some of the benefits. How much does it cost, and how do you get it? So let's jump right into it. So what is the problem with custom reports? So I know some of you on the webinar may very well be using OnBase and the report services or the business activity monitoring module. Those modules excuse me, do alleviate this problem to a certain extent, but if you're not using that and you're relying upon just custom reports through SQL report services or Crystal reports, oftentimes people like a business analyst or anybody that really has the need for the reporting will go ahead and send a request to the IT department saying, here's the report that I would like, and then the clock really starts ticking. Because IT folks aren't just sitting around waiting for email requests for reports. It takes some time, and oftentimes there might be some back and forth communications, more or less handling the specific details of what should be included within the report. And then finally you have the report that's being generated and sent back to the business analyst in this particular case. That passage of time can be an issue because the timeliness of data is very important. So enter reporting dashboards. What is it? All things said and done, it was introduced within version 14 of OnBase, but it is a reporting tool that gives organizations, individuals within organizations, a high level of visibility into their business health as well as the system health. And users have the ability to go ahead and create their own dashboards. These dashboards can be created by the IT department also. But once a dashboard is created, they can be shared with others. That's going to highlight the important information relating to their business needs without the need to have IT involvement. So this data is going to be presented in a variety of different graphical formats. There's grids, charts, graphs, scorecards, maps. There's a few other items here also, which we'll see a little bit later as we get into the presentation. All things said and done, we're now taking the ability of generating reports, creating reports, viewing that data, putting it in the hands of your users who actually need that data rather than requiring IT assistance. So how does it work? A high-level graphical view of how this ultimately happens. An end user who's using the Unity client, by the way, this is a requirement at this point in time of the reporting dashboards. They more or less enter the Reporting Dashboards module, select the report that they want to go ahead and execute, and it sends that request on to the OnBase application server. The application server does all the heavy lifting by communicating with the OnBase database. The database then returns back the information, and in the grand scheme of things, the report is generated and displayed on the user's desktop. Very simple. There's different parameters that can go into the generation of these reports. But once the user has the report back on their screen, they have the ability to go ahead and export that data if they choose to take it outside of OnBase and put it into Microsoft Excel format so that they can manipulate it further. They do have the ability to go ahead and print that report or save that report as either a PDF or an image. And they also have the ability to go ahead and take that report and upload it as a snapshot in time into OnBase, and it'll convert that document into an image upon that upload. Then they have the ability to go ahead and index that document as you would expect with any other document going into the OnBase system. So to give you some graphical representations of some different sample dashboards to whet your appetite, give you some different ideas of what can be generated here. In this particular dashboard, you can see there's some different components. So there's a grid here, which is just offering some static information pertaining to, in this case, the date broken down by month and year, who the vendor is that we received some invoices from, the sum of the invoice amount that we received, and how many documents were received from that particular vendor in that time frame. You can slice and dice this information in a variety of different ways. Take that similar information and now put it into a bar chart. There's our invoice amount on the vertical axis, or along the horizontal axis we have the different months and years that we're dealing with here. And then each individual bar represented by the color is going to be one of our vendors. And you can see at the top there we have roughly between $3,500 and $4,000 of invoices for January 2012 for Computers R Us, and broken down by the different time frames. You also have this filter slider that can be put into any of these dashboards. And the nice thing is that now once you have this first set of results up, if you wanted to go ahead and hone in on a specific month, in this particular case, since we're dealing with months and years, these sliders can be moved across, and then the results of the dashboard will be updated dynamically based upon where you drop those sliders, so that you can go ahead and analyze this information better. And then you also have like pie charts that we see here, broken down by the different month and each of the different vendors, and the dollar amounts of the invoices, the sum for that particular month, being highlighted. So you can see here Computers R Us represented over 45% of our invoice amount in January, Office Supply Warehouse 2.4%, Phone Shack 38%, so on and so forth. So just one example. There's a bunch of different things that we can put on dashboards. Here's another one that now gets into more the current state of our workflow processes. Another accounts payable example here, where this first pie chart is showing how many documents that I have in my different queues. We have the ability to go ahead and have different meters, or I'm trying to think of the proper term within the system here, gauges, showing us how many documents I have within this invoice exceptions queue, and a comparison against what we'd expect that high watermark to be at 2, hence we have a positive 1 variance. And similar information within a grid to what we had before. So as we design these dashboards, we have the ability to drop in any specific data element that a document might be indexed by on these different dashboards. So these dashboards, as I mentioned, can be configured by the end users. The configuration utility is built directly into the Unity client, so users don't have to go into a whole different system. They don't have to learn a whole separate interface. If they understand the Unity client, they're going to have a pretty good start to configuring these dashboards. But there's specific permissions that you need to grant to your end users. For starters, to be able to create these different components, they need to have creation privileges for what are termed data providers. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. Creation privileges for creating dashboards, and as well as potentially categories. And again, all these things we'll talk about a little bit further going forward here. These are all permissions that are going to be enabled inside of OnBase Config as you're setting up your users and your user groups. So that will be something that will be enabled if you choose to move forward with the dashboard feature. So what can I report upon? I think this is a nice building block here. Before we really do anything with a dashboard itself, we need to set up what's termed a data provider. And this data provider, all things said and done, is a query into the OnBase database that's going to return back some results. And there's a variety of different data providers that we can set up. It's a foundation for all the dashboard items like I talked about before, and it's reusable. Once you create a data provider, you can use that on as many dashboards as you like, and there's security that goes behind these data providers also. For example, if you're reporting upon HR data, you're only going to want to allow that data provider to be used by your different HR personnel. Don't let your accounts payable or your customer service folks have access to that particular data provider. And then there's a data provider wizard that comes along with this to make this very simple to configure these different data providers. And here's a screenshot of what that looks like, just to give you an example of today in OnBase 14, the types of data providers that can be set up. You can write a custom SQL query to extract whatever information that you want out of the OnBase system today. That's how it's limited. There could be a document query data provider set up also, where really you're point and clicking, choosing the different document types that you want to be queried, the specific keyword values that you want brought back to be part of this data provider. Workflow activity, now you're talking about the process metrics. How long did it take to move these items through workflow? How many items moved through? Who were my users that were involved with it? Your workflow configuration, really just strictly about your queue configuration as it stands, so more configuration type activity. And workflow inbox, current state of time, how many items do I have in workflow and what is the state? So you can see some of the different things that today can be reported upon. Highland has stated that they plan on expanding these data providers within future versions of OnBase, but as I mentioned, version 14, these are the 5 different types of data providers that can be configured. So to design a dashboard, there is a nice dashboard designer that can pop up once we get to that point. Again, you have the data provider that needs to be set up before, so you associate a data provider or multiple data providers to a dashboard, depending upon what you want appearing on that particular dashboard. And then you can have multiple dashboard items per dashboard. You saw some of the examples that I had before where there's 3 or 4 different dashboard items that appeared on there. Frankly, you can go more than that, but think about the real estate that you have to deal with. When you place each dashboard item on a dashboard, you then configure the specifics for each of those dashboard items. And you'll see that within the demonstration as we get into that. So some of the different dashboard items that can actually appear, here's the different options that you have with a graphical of what each looks like. You can put pivot charts on any dashboard that you wish, and you can see here just broken down by month and year as well as vendor, how many different invoices did we receive. But with the pivot chart, as if you're familiar with pivot charts within Excel, you can go ahead and drill into the data a little bit further. So if we expand January 2012, that shows me all my different invoices and the total of my dollar amounts for each of those invoices. Again, making it very dynamic, allowing somebody to report that information. You can put grids on your dashboards. So similar information to a pivot chart, but really it's static information. You don't really have the ability to drill down deeper into any of these different components. You have different charts, and there's a variety of different bar charts that can be configured very simply here. A solid bar chart like this, showing what I had shown before, the invoice amount, the vendor, potentially now separating this a little bit differently, saying now by vendor, how much did they spend per month and year? How much did they invoice us per month and year? You have pie charts. So taking similar information but now displaying it in a different fashion. In a pie chart, what percentage of my invoice amount came from my different vendors for whatever time period that I had. Gauges, similar to what we saw before, really the different meters, showing me a comparison between some value that could have been a prior month's value or an anticipated value versus what we had actual for potentially a different month. Hence, you see things like down $1.91 thousand for Computers R Us based upon my comparison in prior months. Office Supply Warehouse up 8.36 thousand. Actually, I don't even think that's 1,000 there. But anyways, I think you get the idea of what I'm talking about here. Cards now take those gauges and put them just in a textual fashion. So Computers R Us, similar information, just very in-your-face information pertaining to how things changed from one period to the next. You have different mapping capabilities. So this first map is showing countries that we had different attendees in this particular case. So I think you need to have some data associated with your document types inside of OnBase, either getting down to a state, getting down to a country, a region, so on and so forth, that give us the ability to go ahead and use maps like this in some form or fashion. We also have range filters, skipping over one here. This is not a great graphic, but like I showed you before, that gives us the ability to filter the items that actually appear on our dashboards by dragging any one of those adjustment points to dynamically update things. But you can also see that we have the ability of dropping images and text box on our dashboards. Those aren't really dynamic. It's more or less to make things look nicer and pretty. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the actual demonstration here. Let me switch on over to my virtual machine. So you should see up right now, this is the OnBase Unity client. And once you have reporting dashboards enabled and your user granted permission to the reporting dashboards, it's going to appear as another ribbon bar item. So you can just go ahead and invoke it by clicking on that reporting dashboard. And you have a couple things on the left side here. You have, first off, a dashboard gallery, which you can see highlighted, and you can change things down here. You have the ability to go ahead and set up public dashboards, where this is a dashboard that's now available for anybody that has OnBase permissions and rights to get into the reporting dashboards to execute that report. And all of those expand out. You can see I have no items there. Any dashboards that have been shared with me, so somebody else might have created this, they shared this particular report with me. And you also have the ability of creating different categories. So I created this accounts payable category that now has 3 separate reports that are associated with that category. You also have an administration function. And just to jump in that really quick, we'll come back to that. This is where we're going to go ahead and configure our different dashboard data providers and dashboards themselves. So to run any one of these reports, let me go ahead and invoke this AP invoice history by vendor. You just select it. All things said and done, it's now communicating through that application server like we mentioned and back to the database to go ahead and generate the report. And some reports can be set up with different parameters, prompting the user to say what time frames do we want to go ahead and generate this report for. I'm going to leave this as is. I understand it's 3 years worth of data, but running that particular report, now that brings up my dashboard. And again, I have some different elements here. I have this nice little grid. I have this bar chart. I have this pie chart. And without explaining anything further, let me show you just a few things here. If I hover over any one of these sections, like this January 2012, you can see the dollar amounts for my different vendors. So you have that flyover type of capability, contextual based upon what I'm looking at. Same thing goes for these pie charts based upon the pie slice, where I can see more than just the percentage. Now I can see the dollar amount for what was configured. But the key here is now using this filtering piece. Maybe I want to just go back and take a look at things back in 2012. I can drag any of these slider ends, and as I release this, you can see it now updates my information that actually appears on this chart. So now I'm seeing just January, February, and March of 2012 with similar flyover capabilities, and I can squeeze that in as tight as I want or go out as wide as I want. So that's nice to be able to have those types of components available to us where we can very quickly change the look and the feel of this without me coming back in and actually changing the parameters of the report itself. Let me run one other one really quick here. This late key from image processing time. So now I'm looking more so at workflow metrics. So rather than looking at static document information, this workflow process that I had invoices go through. Down in the grid, I can see all of the different queues and the users that process different documents. Each document, how long was it in a queue? There you can see effectively the document ID that came along with it. But in my bar charts, here's my different users and then their process times. So this AP user, they were involved with all of the different queues that you can see. It took 29 minutes to process this AP clerk review, 7.97 minutes for the ERP entry queue, so on and so forth. Going down to like a Heather Michaels, she only did that AP clerk review. She's processing things in 8 minutes in comparison to that AP user. Pie charts in a similar fashion showing some of that same information, or again with the hover over where I can go ahead and see some more specific information. So that's what the end user ultimately sees, and given they have some different capabilities here, if they wanted to view this in full screen, I can do something like that. Just escape to get out of that. I do have parameters. I have the ability to refresh this, and I can do some different things with filtering if I wish to. But from there, I can share dashboards. I can send them to. I can export the data. I can print it. All those things that we talked about before. But I really wanted to take a few moments and get it more so into the administration so that you have an idea of how easy it is to go ahead and configure these different dashboard items. So again, as I mentioned before, we need to have a data provider set up before you can actually configure a dashboard. So let's very quickly create a new data provider. There's a wizard that walks through all this, so you can copy an existing data provider and make some modifications if there's something very similar. But I'm going to create a new data provider here, and let's just call this legal documents. We'll go ahead and do some reporting off of these legal documents, and you can understand there's some descriptions and things that can come along with some of these components. There's that similar screen that we saw before. Let's just do a document query. I just want to see what kind of volumes of documents that I have and when they came in for my legal documents. Depending upon which type of data provider I'm creating here, the screens are going to change within this wizard. But let me go ahead and just choose my LG document types. And you can see I can do some things to filter out all the other document types just by doing some type ahead information. Once I have that selected, I can continue to move forward. What keywords associated with those document types do I want to have available? And by default, we have information such as the document date, the document ID, so on and so forth. That's going to be there. But now for those selected documents, I now have all of the different keywords. I'm going to select all of them. Think when you're creating a data provider, you're not really saying this information is going to be appearing on my dashboard at this point in time. I need to return it as part of the data provider for it to be available for me to include on a dashboard item. So once you get good at this, you can probably select fewer items to understand, again, what I need to generate that particular report, but also what I need to have appear on my screen. There can be parameters associated with any of these, so if I'm looking for a specific range of dates, I can do that also, but for simplicity, I'm just going to move forward here. It does actually execute that query and brings back all of the items that you're looking for. This is everything that I selected for all of those document types, so I have 63 records that ultimately came back. And then you can go ahead and set up the permissions to this data provider. I'm going to leave this as manager, but you can surely understand how you want to go ahead and tighten down the security on this only to those users that need to execute this data provider. And it gives us a quick update based upon how that query would actually be executed. So there's my legal documents data provider. I'm going to move into dashboards quite quickly here in the interest of time. Now, again, here's the different dashboards that I have the ability to go ahead and modify, but I can create a whole new dashboard here. Similar to before, we can copy an existing dashboard, but let me create a new one here. Let's call this Legal Document Breakdown. And we can have a description. We can associate an icon with it. I'm just going to grab something. We have the ability of setting a refresh rate. 0 is not going to refresh it unless you manually refresh it. Obviously, be careful if you're using a refresh rate on this. You don't want the database being hit every second refreshing this information. Be within reason there. Who should have access to the dashboard? Again, we're going to leave it as manager, but again, that could be anybody, any group, or any particular user. And it's as simple as that to create the outline for the dashboard. By default, it's going to go ahead and launch my dashboard designer. So, first things first, we need to go ahead and add a data provider. You can create a new data provider here or add one that's already been selected or created. Let me select the legal documents here. That will go ahead and then allow me to go ahead and set up the rest of the dashboard. There's more items there that can be set up. So we have a blank slate here. Here's all of my different document keywords associated with that data provider that we set up before. So any of these items can be included on the report. We have file items up here, saving, undo, redo capabilities, properties for the dashboard, refreshing, setting up our parameters, but here's all those dashboard items that we talked about before. I'm going to create a relatively simple one. Let's create a grid. That gives us the ability to now go ahead and drag all of the different items that we want included on this report. So I'm going to just drag and drop my document type name, and you can see it automatically puts it in the graphical representation of what this is going to look like. But let me continue adding new columns. So my company name, my contract type. Let's grab my document date. And as I drop some of these items on here, especially dates and numbers, you can see that it's going to allow us to change some things. So by default, as I drop any date on here, it's going to summarize things by year, but through the drop-down, I can say, you know what, I want to go ahead and categorize this by month and year. And now you can see my data updates appropriately here. Let me take my document ID also, and if I did this well enough, after everything's all said and done, I just want to use this as a dimension, but I also want to set up this value in the format of a number with ones, with no decimal points, so that I can truly see the document ID here. And hopefully if I did this well, after everything's all said and done, you'll see why I ultimately did that. So that's as simple as it is to create a grid here. Let's save our work like normal. Save your work often, otherwise something could happen. Let's go ahead and add a pie to things here. So you can see as we start adding these different components, it'll put them side by side, but then I'll start putting them underneath the different components as we create more items here. But for the pie, notice I have a few different things. I have values, I have arguments, I have series, I have hidden data elements. You'd really need to get into the modular reference guide to understand this a little bit better. But let's go ahead and take my, if I can find it, document type name and use that for one of my values. That doesn't show me much because I need to now put in an argument. I'm going to use that same document type name as the argument so that now I know here's the percentage of all of the document types, percentage of a document type compared to the total of all the document types that I have. Maybe I also want a series. Do I want to break this down more than the entire mass of forever over time? Let me take my document date and use that as a series, where now I can see, defaulting to year, I can see by year how many documents came in for each of these different document types. So it really can be as simple as that to create things. I'm going to get a little more advanced here, and hopefully, as I mentioned before, do something a little fancy here. This display action allows us to drill down into items a little bit further, where in this particular case I'm saying on the grid, so on this piece over here, I can go ahead and enable a display document action that really does use the document ID on the grid to go ahead and retrieve a document associated with this item. So let me save that, and let me save and close the entire dashboard. Let's switch back on over to the native view. Since I didn't associate this with any group, it appears at the highest level with my document, legal document breakdown. Everything that I saw before as I was configuring things, but what that should allow us to do is to take any one of these items, right-click on it, and say, I want to... my action's not appearing there. Well, the concept is I should be able to go ahead and select any one of these items and take a look and drill into that particular item. Obviously, I've not configured something correctly here, but since I'm here, we have this whole right-click capability. We can take a look at the history as it relates to this particular dashboard when it was configured. You can see the date and the time and the user, what ultimately happened pertaining to this, and when was this reporting dashboard actually executed. So that kind of gives you some different ideas. Let me come back to one of my other dashboards that I know that I have this configured, where again I can select any particular item. In this particular case, you can see I have an actions to display the document. So that would dynamically reach into OnBase and return back the document that's related with that particular component on the OnBase reporting dashboard. So there you have it, folks. That's a very quick tour of reporting dashboards. Let's come back to our presentation and finish things up here. If I can get my PowerPoint to come back. I'm clicking too fast here. There we go. So, a recap again. Once you create a dashboard, you have the ability to share that with others. We have that granular security and permissions for the data providers as well as the dashboards. We have some of those interactive capabilities where we do have the ability to filter, update our dashboards, drill down into some further information. We have those display actions that we talked about before where we can open documents. We can drill into workflow queues, open up work view objects, view folders, so on and so forth. So a bunch of different things. We also have that ability to export to Excel, save the file, save it back into OnBase, so on and so forth. So a number of capabilities. So some high-level benefits. Again, this now brings us back into the capability of doing self-service reporting. Allow your end users to go ahead and generate those reports on their own. You understand there's a lot of complex data that can be gathered out of OnBase, but this really does boil it down and presents that in a very simplified fashion for the end user. So it's a very nice tool from that perspective. You now have that information at your fingertips so you can make that real-time decision making. You can identify those trends and bottlenecks, assuming that you're monitoring some workflow capabilities. And all things said and done, you're reducing costs within your organization. You don't have to have an IT person write reports for everybody that wants to have a report. Allow them to self-serve themselves within the reporting dashboards. So the cost for this. It is a $10,000 enterprise license. If you have the Unity client, that's a necessary component to it. Again, once you license the reporting dashboards piece, anybody that can access OnBase client can get into the reporting dashboards. It is only available within OnBase 14 and going forward. And you do need to have that OnBase client license. So, yeah, I think everybody understands those are the basic requirements for it. To get it, talk with your Navient account executive like normal. They'll be able to provide you a quotation and help you to acquire this, get this into your different environments, and begin taking advantage of all the reporting capabilities. So with that, in summary here, I know that this is not an interactive session. I had to re-record this, so there were no questions that came through during the initial component. So thank you very much for taking the time, and reach out to anybody at Navient if you wish to speak with them further about reporting dashboards. Thank you so much.